So, hello, I'm Rachel Brown. Um, I will start off by thanking everybody for coming. I'm not good with technology at all. I try to avoid it whenever possible. So, I was grateful for the attention and the response that the Facebook and everything got, because that's about as limited as my knowledge is for putting things like this out there. Um, and so a little bit about myself before we begin. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm not very significant to the area necessarily. I was born and raised in Natrona. My parents moved there in 1991 when she was pregnant with me, and I was born and raised there. So I just have a passion for, Natrona. My mom raised me admiring old buildings and the old architecture and um, enjoying the craftsmanship that is disappearing these days. And so ultimately, that's what got me involved with pursuing this project. And it's really just been a series of very fortuitous, um, occurrences that has led me to here. So, and that wouldn't have happened without the support from the community. So I want to thank everyone for that. Um, I want to apologize for if I seem nervous at all. It's not due to speaking, it's due to all this. I am like totally out of my element using computers and like those microphones and stuff, so that's got me a little jittery. But I will do my very best, and I will also apologize in advance. I am not Polish, so I am sure that I will not be pronouncing any names properly. So I'm just apologizing in advance for that. There's some of them that have been, said enough around me that I get, but I am not Polish, so I don't understand the silent Z's and C's. So I guess we'll just begin. So I put together this presentation based off of the I call it the salvage project that I headed down at the St. Ladislaus Church. And I've already had to shorten it 3 times because I took thousands of pictures of my documentation while I was there over the course of 4 months. I tried to document everything. If iPhones weren't so easy to use, I would not have. So my ultimate goal is, after all of this presentation will basically just be a general overview of some research I've collected, the history that I've learned about the place, what made it special, and then my experience there. And then my goal is to continue to collect anything, any key pieces or any piece of heritage or legacy that the church might have had. And I'm going to try to get it all put into a book and have that book available probably through the museum. I can't tell you how soon that will be because, like I said, I have way more stuff than I expected to have. And people keep, I put the request out there to, if you've relatives that had significance in the church or photos or anything, and I just keep getting so much. So I want to be able to collect absolutely everything that I can, totally wring the community dry of any piece of documentation that this church might have had, because there is a significant absence of documented history through the regular channels that I had access to when I began this. The majority of the older historical documentation I collected from people like you, just people whose families were in the churches and stuff, because there was nothing in the church that was significant. And then anything pretty much before the 1968 Diamond Jubilee book, it was just a huge gap. So I'm still collecting that information. But anyway, this will just be an overview, and yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to put it all, anything extra that I have. There's tons of details. So I could have been here for like 12 hours giving you guys a presentation on all the stuff that I've collected. So first we'll go over just a brief overview. Maybe it's just new information to some of you. Maybe it's, you know, a refresher. These are just the significant dates. And putting this all into PowerPoint took me right back to college, so it made me very nervous. Like I was like, oh no, I'm gonna get graded on this, and it's probably not the best PowerPoint presentation you've ever seen. But so the key periods of time were the founding of the church, building the new church, building the school, and then the giant renovation overhaul that took place in the 1960s. And then the documentation that I had from there is, like I said, basically from either the museum's book that they have or the Diamond Jubilee book. But it was founded by the Polish people that immigrated to Natrona in like about 1875 is when they started coming into Natrona and making their home there. And by the time it got into the 1890s, the Polish people of Natrona had a significant lack of familiarity and support. They felt like they weren't getting their Polish roots, and they weren't happy with the church that they were going to down there. So with the help of Reverend Ladislaus, someone help me, Miskowitz? I don't know. Miskowitz? Okay. With the help of him, they were able to found the Society of St. Joseph, which then led to the founding of the very first St. Ladislaus Church on Garfield Street, which is this sketch here with the small schoolhouse beside it. But the church grew very, very fast. There was a lot of attendance, and so they saw a need to expand, especially after the original church burned down, which pretty much happened to like every original building in Natrona. Everything eventually, like at one point in history, caught on fire in Natrona. So they, in about 1900, Father Sewick? I've never had anyone correct me, so that's why I'm unsure of how I'm pronouncing these things. He was one of the integral parts of purchasing the 8 lots on Spruce Street, and then he saw the foundation. He was, you know, they started building the foundation for the church in about 1902, and it was, you know, I mean, everyone that's here and loves this church knows the story. It was literally built by the immigrants and the everyday people of Natrona, standing right there next to the father of the church. And they got off work at the mill and they went right over to the church, and they were digging the foundation out, putting the stones in place, and you know, from the ground up, it was basically built by the hands of the Polish immigrants in Natrona. So the church that we all knew and loved on Spruce Street was finished being built in 1903 and dedicated in 1904. When it was built, it had gas lighting and a steam heating system that was in place for at least about 10 years before electricity was put in. And then some point in the next 10 years after that, it was converted to hot water heating instead of the steam, but the radiators were still the same. I don't know how many people think that stuff's interesting, but that's the stuff that I like. The way the buildings were originally built and then how they've adapted over time. It had a slate roof. Some of the original slate shingles are here available that I was able to find up inside the ceiling of the church while I was crawling around inside the walls. Some of the extra tiles and things. So those are some of the original slate tiles from the church. This is a representation of what the property looked like in 1906. So the priest's house was built somewhere around 1900, but I haven't been able to find any actual records of when that was or pictures or anything like that. So this is the only thing that I have that documents that. And then the church as it stood with its dome reaching 90 feet in height, which just is amazing to me at a time like that. So this is another old picture that was sent to me by another parishioner of the church. It looks like just like the postcard, except this is an actual photo of the dirt streets and everything like that. I have tons of these kind of photos, and that's why I'm just excited to be able to put these into a book so that people can have them and look through them and really appreciate, how awesome these, old photos are. And then in about 1909, they realized that there were too many children in the school on Garfield Street, so they needed a bigger school. And conveniently around that time, that school burned down. So they decided to build a new school for the St. Ladislaus children. So they also didn't have to walk across town to go to church, right next to the church. And that was built in 1910 by Father Ostraszewski, Ostraszewski. Yes, Shevsky. Um, he saw the building of the school, and he saw the dedication of it as well that took place in 1911. And the school opened with when it opened in 1911 after the dedication, it had 535 students. And by the time the school closed in the 1970s, it had just over 100. So, throughout those years, that ultimately was the reason that the school couldn't stay open, as they just didn't have the students that they had, that they built the school with the anticipation of having. But I thought that was pretty impressive. 500. I didn't even know there were 500 kids in Natrona in 1911, but if they were all going to St. Lad's school. So then through the rest of it, there's a significant, this is where the significant gap in the history is. I have the list of all the priests and everything, but the detailing of what took place during their time in the church is very limited. So I tried digging around in other ways, like seeing what other events took place in the valley at that time, or looking into things that took place near the church, trying to find, any kind of record of, any changes that were significant. Like one of the things that I have not been able to pinpoint is exactly when the steeples were changed from the tall arching, pillars down to the one that we all saw at the end. It happened sometime between like 1920s and 1940s, I believe, but I have no way of confirming that. That's just kind of how I've narrowed it down. But it's gaps like that that I'm still trying to seek to fill in before I, get this all collected into a nice book for everybody's coffee tables. So through all the years, the next significant changes took place. And this is a Sanborn insurance map from 1912 that shows the school has been built. And the school also had gas lighting and steam heat. In fact, when I was crawling around in all the ceilings, and I say that literally, I was crawling around in all the ceilings. Sometimes they were like that big. I found Yes. Well, the one ceiling in the school, which I'm referencing right now, was actually they had dropped the ceiling of the hallway. I believe it was in the 1950s when they updated the fire code, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But I did find one original remaining gas light fixture that was stuffed up inside the floor and all bent up, and brass is real soft when it's real thin like that, but it was really, really cool. It was the only one that I found like that. But the one thing I want to say about the gas lighting, it was very cool, is that, even when I was going throughout the church, you can see, if you know what to look for, you can see traces of the old ways that things were. Like all of the outlets for the gas lighting, the pegs and everything, they were still capped and just, on the walls and things. And it tells its own story of, how things used to look back in the day. And then this is another old photo that was sent to me of another angle of the church. Again, I'm guessing, I think it's actually this picture, but a little bit grainier. It's, I believe it's probably sometime in the 30s or 40s this picture was taken, but again, I have no way of confirming that. Yeah, so the next significant period in time was during Father Buzza, um, is when he was in charge of the church, and he facilitated the Golden Jubilee, which was the 50-year anniversary of the establishing of the church. He purchased the Friel House on Pine Street that was they used as the convent that the Babenstacks lived in, and Patty still lives. And then the biggest key significant portion of it for me was, in trying to fill in the blanks, was there was significant changes that happened in the 1950s before all the renovations that took place in the 1960s, and I wasn't sure exactly how to pinpoint them or when they happened until I realized that it was due to a change in the National Fire Safety Code. And if anybody knows the history of, what significant things took place in the 1950s, was the Our Lady of the Angels school fire in Chicago, Illinois. On December 1st of 1958, 92 children and 3 nuns were killed in a fire at a Catholic school in Chicago, Illinois. And it was all due to I guess at the time, from what I learned, I guess at the time the fire safety code, they weren't necessarily up to code on it, but at the time the people in charge of enforcing it weren't really enforcing it too hard. So there were significant areas of the school that did not meet the fire safety regulations in place, but there were also other factors that had not been previously considered, and it caused the entire nation to stop and completely renovate. I think it said there was about 16,000 Catholic schools across America that basically shut down. They were condemned until they were updated to match these updated fire safety codes. It said that there was a link between like the high ceilings. So like this is the stuff that I was looking for, like when they dropped the ceilings and when they did all of the asbestos flooring and when they did, the heavy duty doors. That was all done before the 1960s renovation. And it was done in response to this National Fire Safety Code change. And they believed that the wooden cubbies that were in the hallways caused the fire to spread rapidly, and the high ceilings and low windows prevented the smoke from exiting the building. So a lot of the children that perished in the fire was due to smoke inhalation. But it was a significant thing that happened that affected not just our school, but the schools all across the country. So that was something that filled in a couple of blanks for me. But that included that's when they sealed up the fire exit, the emergency fire escape that was on the outside of the school. They got rid of that because it no longer met code. That's when they built the stairwells on the 2 sides of the school that went all 3 floors. That's when they installed the new the fire alarm system that was in the school. One of the things that I read that was interesting was that the school that caught fire in Chicago, their fire alarms were not actually connected to the fire department. And I guess that was something that a lot of schools didn't have. They had a fire alarm system that like could be triggered by a switch in the school, but it wasn't connected to any kind of outside rescue teams or authorities. So that's when all that was put in place, and a whole list of other things that I would love to bore you about if I get my book published. So after Reverend Buza was Malashevsky, I called him Mal the whole time I was there. When I would make comments when you're there by yourself. Sometimes in a big empty church, you start talking to yourself. When I would just start talking to Ed Mal, I called him, and ask him questions like, "Why did you do this?" or "When did this happen?" So I just called him Ed Mal, but I don't know if he would like that or not. That was I hope I'm not disrespecting him by calling him Father Mal. I like it. It's a cute. I think it's a nice nickname. But he was when he took over the charge of the church in 1966. There was a lot of things that he updated. There's I mean, I have 2 pages worth of things that he updated in the church, and the key thing that I want to say about Father Mao is that at the time, all the things that he did were so fantastic for the church. I mean, there's no way anybody in 1968 could have seen any of his improvements as negative in any way. At the time period, they were like absolutely the best that he could have done, and they probably were the envy of a lot of other parishes. You know, the things that he was putting in, the new stained glass windows, renovating the front of the church, all those things. But these were things that some of the changes that he had made in the school, in the church, that he could not have foreseen would have actually been partially to blame in not being able to save it in the end. Like changing the facade of the church disqualified it from the National Historic Registry. And the way that he changed it, there's no way it could have been restored to the way it was to make it qualify. So unfortunately, that was a big factor in you know, one of the reasons that they weren't able to explore preserving it and having funding to save it and things like that, having a support system for it. And like I said, he would have had absolutely no way of knowing that. You know, at the time, it was probably amazing and everybody loved it and it was convenient, and everyone had a roof over their heads and they were probably happy when it was raining, but it did not serve a very good purpose in the very long run. Some other things that he did were he covered up a lot of the original hand-painted murals. He put in that really beautiful front entryway that you, sorry, next slide. The front colored glass entryway that were in both sides of the cry rooms. Is that what they're called? 'Cause I'm not Catholic either, so that's another apology. I'm not Catholic, so they're absolutely beautiful. But in, you know, when I personally took, so the colored glass, all the ones with the symbols, they are still in storage with the parish. Anything that had religious symbolism or had been blessed at any point or was a religious character could not go outside of the parish due to the Pittsburgh Diocese's restrictions on that. So those things are still with the parish. But the other pieces of colored glass went to another a local person that was a parishioner that they do, like, they work with stained glass and stuff. They came and they offered to buy the non printed things, but the frames that were left I actually removed. It was not easy. My friend Bob that is here had helped me with removing one of them, and it was quite a feat. But when we removed them, I did see underneath it there was a beautiful mural that had been covered over in the very front entryway there. And another thing that I have not been able to find photos of is in the basement of the church. we discovered the original swing doors for the 2 cry rooms and the interior door that would go into the church chapel. They're very large. I think they're 93 inches tall with beveled glass, and they were just sitting in the mud in the basement in the back, left to rot. So I was able to save those, and I have those in my project collection to try to restore. I'll have to take off, a significant portion of the sides of the door that were in the mud that rotted a bit, but the glass was intact and everything. And I'm hoping to give those new life one day, but I have not been able to find any photographs of those doors in place. I've just been able to confirm, I think it was Patty Babinsack confirmed that she remembered those doors and where they were, because I didn't even know where they were. That's what were in place of the aluminum doors that he put in the 1960s renovation. So there was one on either side that went into the fry rooms, and then there was a swing door that went into the main church. So that's a cool thing that I get to work on at some point when I have free time, and hopefully be able to put new life in and put back into the community somewhere. These are some pictures from the Diamond Jubilee book that showcased all of the renovated, classrooms and everything in the school, the mural that was put into that hallway. There was a lot of really good photos, but like I said, I had to shorten this thing like 3 times already. So, I could go on and on about all the renovations that took place in the 1968 renovation, but I hope to just be able to put those in a book that I'm going to put out, or there is an online copy of the Diamond Jubilee book that's on some nondescript website. It's just like you just kind of find it by accident. But it's black and white. This one's in color, but it's in black and white. And but it's also available out there that I could put a link to it, out in public, maybe on my Facebook page, so that you guys can look through the Diamond Jubilee book if you don't have one. So now we will go into more present day goings on in the church. So the story with the altars, I don't know if everybody knows what went on with the altars, but it was before I even got involved. The parish was approached by a very small group of Catholics in a South Pacific island community called Tonga, and they wanted to purchase the altars for a church community that they are building on their little island in the South Pacific. And so they came and they dismantled the altars and they had them shipped, and they went over to their little community. They were still building the church over there, I believe. And then now I don't know if they're necessarily in place yet, but these are some pictures of the scaffolding in place, and them taking them apart and everything. And this is, I don't know if this is in place where they're going to be, or if this is still in their workshop where they just reassembled them and painted them and made sure that they were perfect. But these are what they look like right now. This is where they are in the South Pacific, and those are yours. I know. I mean, I'm sure they didn't use the right shade of a color, or they did something different, but it, to find a home for these is wonderful, and it would have been a lot harder to find somewhere for these to go on our own here in the States, where everybody's dealing with a lack of funding and resources. And these actually I think Mary Jane had actually shared these from the Diocese of Tonga's Facebook page, which I think is a public page. So they're available on Facebook, and being passed around. So now going into my involvement. So I will briefly go over my involvement. Like I said, it was a lot of very fortuitous. I gotta keep track of the time too, because I want to make sure this doesn't go over. Pretty good, actually. Um, so my involvement with it was very, what's the word that I'm looking for? Serendipitous, maybe. It was just, for me, it was a shot in the dark. And then for like Tom and the parish, they keep saying that I came out of nowhere. I'm like, I've been here in Natrona. You know, I'm not like a comet came out of nowhere. I've been here, but I guess because I'm not Catholic, they didn't know who I was. But so my mom and I, like I said, we've always had a passion for the old buildings of Natrona, and we really have always wanted to get involved with preserving the history and honoring the heritage and everything, not just in Natrona, but in the whole AK Valley, you know. But we've never really had the connections or the resource because we're not, you know, she's from Monroeville, so she's not born and raised in the valley. We don't have deep roots down here. My family's from Upper Burrell, so not still technically in the valley, but not Natrona, you know. So we always kind of felt like we were already outsiders. And then we also, you know, like many other people in Natrona, don't have any money. So, um, you know, we were always trying to look for ways to help out in the community or volunteering or, you know, trying to find loopholes or ways to get involved with some of the buildings that have been blighted or, you know, need a little bit of love. And pretty much at every turn, we've been like sandbagged or ignored or, you know, if you're from Natrona, I'm sure you've had your fair share of grievances with the municipal building in the township. But you know, it was definitely a fortunate event. So we saw the well, I'll show you the next slide. So this is what I grew up looking at. This is from my front porch. This is from my bedroom window. This is I've always just admired the church. I've woken up every single day my whole life, and the first thing I see when I come outside has been the big dome and the towers, and you know, I never was in the church. I never went in it, but I always just admired it from afar. I always kind of felt like I wasn't allowed in there because I wasn't Catholic. But I absolutely loved it. And when the article came out in on September 4th last year about it being slated for demolition, my mom and I were both heartbroken and shocked. I'm sure many of you were as well. To put it nicely, shocked and heartbroken. Yeah. So, you know, we had the same conversation that we've had many times. Anytime we heard that there was a building slated for demo in the town, we're like, what can we do? Who can we talk to? You know, is there anything? And, you know, my mom said, you know, there's got to be something we can do. I'm like, Mom, I don't even know, you know, who the heck would we even talk to? Like, you know, we don't know any of these people. I don't even know because it's Catholic. I'm like, you know, is it like a top secret organization? They don't, you know, they won't even talk to us if we go up to, I didn't know anything about it. So she did some digging and she noticed the name Babensack in the article, and she's always been good friends with Patty. She and my grandma and Patty, they knew each other forever. So she threw a Hail Mary and reached out to Patty and was like, hey, do you know this guy, Tom? And she's like, yeah, it's my son. And my mom was like, "Oh, okay. Well, here's, we just saw the article, and here's what, my daughter would really like. Cause I just started to try my own carpentry business. I started my own carpentry business in 2021. Um, my I'll do it very, very briefly, because we're getting to know each other. I was in quality. I worked for a military defense contractor in Saxonburg, up until the pandemic hit. I was in charge of the entire training system in the entire company. It was over 300 employees, and I was also the quality records keeper at a computer. And I hated it. I hate sitting behind a computer. Ever since I was very, very, very little, I always wanted to be a carpenter. It was the first thing I ever wanted to be because my dad was a carpenter. And I would help him out in the garage. My job was to sweep up the sawdust. I wasn't allowed to touch anything. I could sit there and watch him. He couldn't teach me anything either because he had the, patience of nothing. Um, So he would give me like 2.5 seconds to comprehend what he was saying before he'd lose his patience. So I could watch from afar, but I knew it was the first thing I ever wanted to be when I was little. And I always had that, but I always just kind of kept it as a side hobby. So when the pandemic hit, I'll give you the very quick run of events. Um, in January, on January 18th of 2020, I found out I was pregnant with my first child. And then 4 days later, my grandma died. And so the 3 months before that, my father, who was an alcoholic, his health plummeted and he went onto life support in the hospital. He wasn't able to work anymore. He had stage 4 cirrhosis of the liver. Up until January, I had been fighting to keep him going and get him through rehab just until he could get to the place where he could make the decision if he wanted to keep going or not, because he had done all the damage already. So my father had just come home from rehab on January 4th. He went all the way he was on life support in the ICU for in 2 different hospitals for a total of 6 weeks. And we got him, up to the point where he could go to rehab and then go home. And he went home on January 4th. And then I found out I was pregnant on the 18th. My grandma died on the 22nd. And then my dad, as he got his freedom back, didn't care anymore and just went right back to drinking. He died on May 11th, and I lost my job on May 12th when I was 5 months pregnant. And that's 2 months after the pandemic hit. So it was like my entire world was just, I didn't even know who I was anymore, because I had never had anyone die even close to me, and I didn't have many people anyway. So I didn't know what to do. So I had to we were still dealing with my grandma's death, and now I had to deal with my dad's death and being 5 months pregnant in a pandemic with an autoimmune disease, which is fun. And so I decided to not look for a new job. I wrote out the rest of the pregnancy and the subsequent 3 months because of the unemployment that was available during the pandemic. So that was a little bit of a silver lining. When I decided to rejoin the workforce, I didn't want to sit behind a computer anymore. So I got a job at a wood shop to try to pursue being a carpenter. And then after working there for about 6 months, I decided I wanted to try it on my own. So I started my own carpentry business in August of 2021, just doing like furniture and stuff like that. So there's your brief history of me. And then what brings us up to reaching out to Patty Babinsack in September of 2023. My mom said, my daughter just started a carpentry business. She has a real passion for these old buildings. Is there someone, can we talk to your son about, maybe helping out? I don't know what the church is going to do with all this stuff, because it was still full. The whole church was still full of stuff, and all the windows were still there and everything. So Patty gave us Tom's number, and I called him on I think it was the 14th, and then I met him on the 18th. And this was my very first walkthrough of the church. These are some of the photographs from my very first walkthrough of the church on September 18th of 2023. This is after this is about the part of my presentation where if people weren't involved with the whole process or haven't seen the church since it was beautiful and running and wonderful, and it's the beautiful church in your memory, this is the part of the presentation where it's going to start getting a little hard, because it's going to start not looking like that church anymore, because this is what it looked like when I came in. It was already showing the signs of damage that had taken place over this last several decades, and it had already been vacant for a year, on the market for a year, which we found out as well. When we started talking to Tom, we didn't even know it was for sale. But I guess that's because they don't publicize the Catholic churches in the area that are available anymore. I don't know. They gave me a couple answers. It didn't make sense. But it was still on the market for sale, but nobody had purchased it in the last year. And so this is what the church looked like after sitting vacant for a year, and being in the state that it was. Some of the church was still beautiful, like the organ was still standing there all stately. The vestments press cabinet that you see, which I had to learn what that was. I did not know what that was. It was gorgeous, and if I had a place for it, I would have bought it myself from the parish, but we found a very, very good home for that with another priest actually out in Scranton. They came all the way from Scranton to come get it. It was a huge box truck. And then this was my first walkthrough was through the school. So my understanding was that, yes, the school had closed in the 70s, but they had only used it as storage since then. So there was no evidence of actual activity being done, but it was packed full of stuff, completely packed full. The classrooms were still full of desks. I put this in here for you, Mary Jane. That was from when she was teaching Sunday school. CCD, same thing? Okay. For Presbyterians, it's Sunday school. I don't know if it's the same thing as CCD. But yeah, all of the classrooms were still completely full. The hallways were packed full. I believe there's a lot of stuff that was in the school that, from what I understand, came from St. Joseph's High School when it caught on fire. So a lot of that stuff came here for storage, and sat for many, many years, and they said they didn't want any of it. They had asked many times that they wanted to come get their stuff, and they did not. They were not interested in the stuff that was in the school. There was, just evidence everywhere of the school. The school was definitely one of the bigger areas of decay. It had the flat roofs that were put on it, on the sides where the stairwells were added in the 50s were done with a flat roof, and I don't think it was either done properly or it was not maintained, because moisture started coming in from the side roofs and leaking in through the walls, to the point where once we did have the school cleared out and the abatement began, they had to take off some of that cover from the, I call it the Band-Aid, that was on the flat roof. And when we came in after a pretty heavy rainstorm, there was literally water balloons behind the paint on the walls in the school. It looked like giant teardrops were coming down the walls, big teardrops were coming down, but they were behind the paint. That's how much moisture had been coming into the school for almost 50 years. Yeah, in a not so nice way. The way that I saw it is that the school, with the neglect that had been given to it, was almost the cancer of the church, because they had a number of prospective investors and buyers in the year that it was on the market, but the biggest issue was the school building, because it was A, nowhere near up to code, B, full of asbestos, had lead paint all through it, the roof was shot, there was so much damage that was already done, and all of that would have had to have been on top of the repairs that were needed to the church, which ended up, if you tallied them all up, it was well over $1 million worth of repairs that were needed for that church, just because of quick fixes, or my brother's ex-girlfriend's cousin doing the job instead of a licensed professional over the years. Things like regular drywall screws were used in the shingled roof, things like that were definitely quick fixes and needed at the time, but they're the reason that it had gone on for so long and got to the point that it was at. So ultimately, what led to the decision being made of taking it off the market and pursuing the demolition was almost out of the hands of the diocese, which a lot of people don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people don't want to even believe. But the insurance that they were carrying on the property was over $20,000 a year. They were paying for liability insurance on the vacant church, and it got to the point where the insurance company they came in and they did an appraisal of the property, and they said the amount of the damages that would need fixed, they would not cover, and was not worth the price of the building. And so they said that they would, instead of fixing the building, they would pay to have it demolished from the insurance. So from a financial reason, the diocese had no choice really, because they would have had to pay out of pocket the, $900,000 plus repair bill that was needed properly on the school, on the church, or let the insurance pay to tear it down. It was one of those decisions. I would not have wanted to be the one that had to make that decision, because I can understand it from a business side and from a financial side, especially with all the parishes that were being condensed, and all the struggles that have been going on. Just from what I understand from an outside perspective of the Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh in the last several years, I can understand why they had to make that decision. But it doesn't make it any less hard that that's how it came to. It was really a series of very unfortunate decisions over the course of 60 years that led to that being the ultimate fate of the church. So like in the pictures of the dome, I know a lot of you saw like the plaster that's in the like that was in the arches of the church. There was a big chunk that had fallen down. That was due to the moisture that was coming in from the roof. And I'll be showing you pictures from the inside of the roof. The beams are saturated. I mean, even just with the smallest rain, you can see all the watermarks and all the saturation in the roof beams. It wasn't even like to replace the roof. Yeah, the roof needed replaced, but it had gotten to the point where, at least for the last 20 or 30 years, moisture had just been collecting underneath the shingles, and all the wood was rotten. So you would have had to replace all the wood, and that's what brought the bill up. Just replacing the shingles was almost $500,000 to just take the old shingles off and put a new roof on, because of the height, because of the different slopes, and because of the different angles and the square footage. And then you factor in all the rotten wood that was underneath. Repairing all the plaster work from all the moisture that had seeped in would have been almost $200,000 just to repair the plaster. And that's not even including, touching up the paintings on the walls that had gotten cracked and chipped because of the moisture and everything like that. And then the dome was another issue. So it was clear that the dome had been, I don't know if it's the way that it was built. This is the first building that I've ever been intimately involved with that had a giant dome like this. I'm sure that there are not many that are left with a giant dome like this. So I'm not sure if it was in the engineering, or if it was partly to blame with the repairs that needed made that weren't, or what, but the dome was sagging. The whole dome wanted to come in. And they had been, there's evidence that they had been fighting it for at least 50 years. They had been fighting the dome falling in. There were giant makeshift brackets inside the rafters of the ceiling. They had completely, paperclip and bubble gummed up the rafters, trying to make sure that the dome didn't sag anymore. And I think that it was just getting to the point where the dome was eventually going to come down. There was water coming in along the top portion of the dome, above where the columns and the windows were. All of this wood, and I was up there, and I have pictures from here too. All of this wood was just bubbled and rotten and flaking, and Yeah, I mean, there was only there was four sets of those gigantic windows, which I don't know if anybody actually knows how big those windows were on the dome. They were on my list to try to save, and I really wish that I could have, but they were not only were they 85 feet in the air, so I'm up there on the roof, 85 feet in the air. Each one of those square windows that was in the dome was like 4 by 4, 4 foot by 4 foot, and about that thick. And the glass, it was just a colored glass, but the wood frame that was on them was about that thick. And when they swung out, they swung out 4 feet, and then you're just on this really sloped roof, and you don't have anywhere to brace yourself. And it was September through December, so it was quite windy up there. So it was very, very difficult to be up inside that dome, but I was able to get up there and take some peeks. But again, this is still my initial walkthrough here. I keep getting off track here, but this is literally all these pictures of my first impression of the church, because I had never been in there before, and I got to go up inside the bell tower because Tom let me. And if you let me go somewhere, I'll go. I don't care if it's got spider webs or 70 years of coal dust or whatever. I'll be up in there and crawling around. And so the next slide is something that I'm very, very happy that I was able to acquire. And it is posted on my business Facebook. It's a video. So anybody that wants to watch, hear it after this presentation, you can hear it whenever you want if you go on my business Facebook page. It's the only way I know how to get it out to you guys. But it was my first time in the church, and it was the last time the bell ever got to ring. So it's right here. It's up at Blessed Sacrament. So the demolition contractors, it was written in their contract to remove the bell. While there was a hiccup when it happened, the bell survived, and it is up it's up at the church somewhere. I don't know if it's still exactly where they put it that day. I haven't been up there to check, but it is up at Blessed Sacrament for display outside. But this is, I want to make sure my volume's up enough on there. I was allowed with another person that was there taking out a couple of the smaller stained glass windows, the X windows above the windows. His name's Dan Bain from Natrona. He was there as well. We both went up into the tower, and he took this video for me of me ringing the bell. And it, as far as I believe, it is the last time the bell was ever rung. And I can't even, I mean, I know that it probably has significance for a lot of you guys, but I can't tell you how honored I was to have that opportunity to be able to ring it. Tom gave me permission, and I wasn't about to say no. He was like, "It's gonna be pretty loud." I'm like, "I don't care." I was very excited to do that, so I was happy to be able to do that, and then Dan was able to get it on video. So these are some more pictures of the bell. Some information I found out about the bell is that it is a McShane bell from the McShane Bell Company when they were still out of Baltimore, and it was from 1893 when the church was founded. So I found some news articles from the valley of that time. There was 3 churches in the valley that all got bells around the same time, and St. Lad's was one of them, and it was all in 1893 area. But this was the bell. I mean, originally it was in the church on Garfield Street, but then when they built the new church, they brought the bell over from Garfield Street, and that is the original bell that was for the St. Joseph Society that founded St. Lad's. And this is me up on the roof, making my mother so nervous. she was safely on the ground, but she just, anytime, I'm not afraid of heights, and that's a fear for her. She's afraid that I'm not afraid of heights. But I know it's one of my biggest strengths being in, having this passion is that I'm not afraid of heights. I was up 30 feet on the scaffolding, real sketchy, getting those windows out. Each one of those stained glass windows weighed probably at least 50 or 60 pounds each panel. So yeah, it's a strength, but the view from the roof was my favorite part of working at that church. There were so many mornings when when things were in full swing and I was completely overwhelmed with the project that I took on. My heart was there, but I guess I didn't necessarily think of how overwhelming it was going to be until I really got into the nitty gritty. This was my safe place. I would start my morning up on the roof, even if it was, 10 degrees with a little bit of ice up there. I'd go up there with my coffee. I'd stay real close to the side, but it was my favorite way to start my day working down there. And it was like the best way to get into the mindset of working in there and facing what I was about to face, because it was, on my end, it was exciting being able to explore this building and try to save as much as I could and really appreciate it for what it was. But then at the same time, I was welcoming anybody that, wanted to come in and, say their goodbyes and tell me their heritage with it. And so it was like a bittersweet type of thing, all the work that I was doing there. It was exciting on my end, but at the same time, it was, it was really a sad thing. So this is the very brief section of my salvage project. And when I say brief, I'm not kidding. I had about 4,000 photos from my time there. I had to condense it and shorten this presentation several times. But these are just some of the significant parts. And then when I get my book out, I'd love to put every single detail in there, every last, thing that left the church, every last plate, every last, whatever. I'd love to be able to put that in there and where it went and what it's doing, but I had to condense it for the presentation. So total, there was, I don't remember the count. It changed constantly because we kept finding desks, but there was definitely over 300 desks and chairs that were stashed into the school, either from the time that it was open or from other schools in the area that had closed. I think even one of the other schools in the Heights, when it closed and they cleaned it out, they think they put some of those in there. So when Tom basically gave me the go ahead to, I had the walkthrough, and he was gracious enough to take me and my mom through and see everything, and it was clear that he was tired. He was he's had to deal with the magnitude of the situation for the past year, and he had all of this stuff that he was facing to try to figure out what to do with it before demolition. And he was torn because the parish didn't have any money to pay for people to come in and move the stuff or store the stuff. It was going to take $150,000 just to have a company come in, remove the stained glass windows, and put them in a box. And that's not including the magnitude of repair work that they all needed, because they had not been maintained probably since, if at all, not since the renovation in the 60s. And everyone knows with the weather and the climate we have down in Natrona, something as fragile and delicate as a stained glass window should really be upkept. So a lot of the stained glass windows were literally just coming apart at the seams, and they would have needed another hundreds of thousands of dollars of repair on top of the $150,000 just to remove them. So Tom was facing all of that in addition to being the business manager of the parish, which I don't even want to know what he has to deal with. Plus, he's an attorney. I'm like, I don't know why he signed up for that. I was very excited I wanted to help in any way I could. And I said, look, I'm not good at Facebook. I'll tell everybody that all day long, but I'm part of a couple of very good groups of very passionate, people on Facebook that's nationwide that are all about historic preservation and architectural salvage and saving the past and reusing and saving things from the landfill. I said, Tom, let me just try. I said, I will do as much as I can here if you just let me try. And he said, okay. I said, you can do what you want to do. So I put out a post on Facebook to a couple of the groups that I was a part of. And I would say probably within the 24 hours that I had that post out there saying like, hey, I posted all the pictures from my walkthrough. And I said, we have this church down here. It's slated for demo. It's full of stuff. I need help. And I put that out there. And within 24 hours, I had over 300 messages from people all across the country that wanted to come and help. They wanted to come and salvage things. Some of them even just sent donations straight to the parish. They reached out to me and asked who to send donations to, and I directed them up to the parish. And well, that would have been nice, but again, that would have had to have been over $1 million. And that's just to save it. That's not even to keep it going for the amount of congregation that was left in it. I mean, it would have been wonderful, absolutely. But I just, that would have been an even longer shot than just trying to find someone to buy the church, which I had, in the 24 hours and in the coming couple of months, I probably had at least 20 people that reached out to me about, is the church for sale? And I would keep checking with Tom because they already had paperwork going in with the demolition company and everything. And he would check, he would pass every message I had along to whoever he had to get the answer from in the diocese. And, they said up until the abatement begins, which is when they come in and they handle all the asbestos and hazardous materials, up until that point, if they had someone that came in with cash in hand and wanted to buy the building as it was and take it off their hands, they would have canceled the contract with the demolition company and let it go. But if we didn't find any of them, someone before the abatement began, then it was too far gone. It was out of their hands because then it was in process. So every time I had somebody reach out to me that said, I'm interested in buying the building, I'd say, absolutely, here's who you contact. And I would give them the real estate person, or I'd give them Tom's direct personal phone number to call at 3 o'clock in the morning. And we had several people come through, people that came from the other side of PA, they would come through, and while they had $150,000 in their pocket, they didn't have the $1 million to invest in repairing it, and they didn't have they didn't see the proper economy in Natrona to make it anything else either, because we don't have a public transit system. There's no bus line that goes through Natrona anymore. The percentage, they have to look at things from like a real estate lawyer side of things, and the amount of vacant properties versus occupied properties versus rentals versus houses that are owned was so minimal that even if someone came in that was, passionate enough to take it on, there were no investors that, based on those criteria, would have even considered investing money into that property just because of where Natrona is and what it is at this time. Because there's no, Dollar General didn't even want it. And that's saying something. Toward the end, before they realized, before they agreed to do demolition, Tom reached out to Dollar General and they came through and they said, can't do it. There's no bus line. There's no traffic. There's not the amount of stuff that they need to put a Dollar General there. So, it was really everything as badly as I would have wanted to have the money too. I was even pursuing ways to raise $150,000 to buy it, taking out a loan or, putting a GoFundMe out there or something. But, it wasn't just the $150,000. It was the $1 million it would have needed just to get it back on its feet, and then the amount of money it would have taken to keep it going. With the vaulted ceilings, I think their gas bill, one of the potential investors that was very serious, another young, crazy person like I am, but who has connections with investors, was very, very, very interested in it and was trying to get his dad on board. And his dad was one of the investors and linked with a bunch of different investing companies in Pittsburgh and stuff. And they've rehabbed properties like this. They've turned them into affordable housing or rehab centers or whatever. You know, we kept pushing it, and we got all the information from Tom, and Tom got us a list of all of the utilities and all the expenses that were needed just in the last year of operation, from September 22 to, or September 21 to September 22 for that church. And the gas bill alone was almost $6,000 for that year. And, you know, like I said, the insurance on the place was $20,000 a year just for the liability insurance. And electricity, a lot of the lights that were in it, it was an outdated electrical, well, not totally outdated electrical system, but the lights were not energy efficient. When I first started working in the church after it had been vacant for a year, they had, I guess the electric companies do a thing where if a commercial property is not, you know, kind of goes into like limbo, they, you know, they drop the electric bill. Well, it had just gotten to that point when I got involved, and then I was in there. All I did was turn on some lights. That's all I was doing in there. I would run a power tool maybe like 10 minutes a week, you know? So it was all just lights that was on, and the electric bill was $900 for the first month I was there. And I only turned on a handful of lights. You know, and then Tom came in and was like, okay, you only get to turn on 4 lights in the whole church. And even then, it was still $400 or $500 the next month just from turning on the lights on. So, you know, it's all those factors that went into not being able to find the one person who had unlimited money and unlimited ambition to take on a property in an economy that was dead. But anyway, back to the desks. So there was definitely over 300 desks, and with the response that I got from my initial, you know, thing that I put out there, I did have over the course of the coming months, I was there for 4 months total. I literally did have people come from all across the country to rescue things from here. I had a lady came from the other side of Ohio with a giant enclosed trailer, and I think she took at least 60 desks and chairs and some other stuff, and you know, and it was all basically, aside from the few things that you know, Tom was excited that I had some knowledge of like the architectural salvage market, which my biggest pet peeve of the architectural salvage market and how it's gone is because of HGTV and how everything is like, you know, skyrocketed in price. People can't even afford to fix up their old houses and old buildings anymore because, you know, the fancy people on HGTV think everything is like, you know, chic and you can turn everything around, repurpose, and everything is so much money. I didn't want that to be the case here because I wanted to actually find the things homes and not have them go into a landfill and stuff. So pretty much everything was just whatever they wanted to get for donation. And aside from just a couple of things that we would kind of put like well, we'd like to at least get this much for it for the parish, you know, and even then it was like absolute bottom side of retail what it would be in the market. We raised somewhere around $20,000 over the course of the 4 months, just having people come, and they took it away themselves. We didn't have to lift a finger. You know, they came in, they arranged an appointment with me. I had them sign a waiver because I wasn't going to be liable for anybody stepping on a rusty nail or anything. They came in with their own tools, and they were pulling out windowsills and light fixtures and door frames and flooring and anything that they thought they could use in their own homes, basically. We even found homes for most of the viable radiators. I think, what was the final count? 29 of them went to Craig Campbell. who is a Natronian and has a rental company. He and his two young helpers came in 2 different trips and took this is a picture of them taking the radiators from mostly from the school. They were most of them were still good because the system was drained properly. And I think he paid like just over what scrap value would be for each one of them, just in the effort of like trying to save them from the dump, you know. And then Desiree, who owns Harvest Moon Coffee, she came through and she got a ton of stuff, and a lot of it is up at her new location in Natrona Heights. Like a lot, the leather chair came from the school. The 2 sofas came from the school. You can't see the red ones buried in this picture, but it was buried underneath some carpet and some disintegrating foam pieces from school plays and stuff. And she, you know, has all that stuff, put it back in the community for use, and that was a really nice thing. Especially with some of those, you never know when you get into some of those old upholstered pieces of furniture if you're going to be able to find it at home. But luckily, the room that a lot of that stuff was stored in was mostly dry. So it was basically in dry storage for as long as it had been there. So it wasn't, you know, it was pretty clean. So she was able to give those a home. The St. Lad's piano, we sold it for a whopping $1 because I was just happy to find someone that wanted to take a piano in this day and age. Went to one of the home of 2 of the volunteers that volunteered many hours of their time to help me with the stained glass windows. They fell in love with the piano and they took the piano home. That was in the school. The pine tongue and groove boards that were on the walls in the basement. A local farmer from Sarver area is opening his own restaurant. He came and he ripped most of it out himself, and he's already put a lot of it up in his little establishment up in Sarver. And that was a lot of work too, ripping all that out, making sure it wasn't, you know, tongue and groove. If you try to rip that out, a lot of times you damage it. So it's nice to see that he's up in Sarver by Concordia, right off of 356, and there's some people at Concordia that are familiar with St. Lad's, and they were so excited when they found out that like they're in connection with him, and he told them about having helping out with the church and getting the pine boards and putting it up in his place. They came over and they were checking it out at his restaurant. It's not open yet, but they were over there checking it out, and they were very, very happy. They recognized it immediately. So, you know, it's nice that stuff like that is living on. Is Bob still here? Oh, dang it. I don't remember what he's calling, what the name of it is, but his farm is Willow Creek Farms. It's right next to Concordia up there. And then it's at the old restaurant that's like right there at that intersection. It was most recently called Eatery, I think it was. But it's just a little building, and it's going to be like right there at that intersection by Concordia. I think he's actually set to open this week. I think tomorrow, I think, was his scheduled opening day. So that will be available up there. This was the upper portion of the 2 spiral staircases in the towers. A local lady from New Kensington who bought an old firehouse on Victoria Avenue in New Kensington purchased the 2 sections of the spiral staircase that were up above the painted portion. So this is the original finish of them, and she's going to get them. She's going to put them in her. I say she, but I'm pretty sure she's going to hire me to do it. Put them in her firehouse for her. So that was fun removing those too. If you don't know anything about how they put things together, like way back in the day, they loved nails, and they loved the ones that were at least 4 inches long, and they wanted to use about 6 of them at every joint, going in every different direction. So it takes a lot of patience and a lot of elbow grease to get things like this apart without destroying them. I try not to use power tools if I can avoid it. I just use these power tools, you know. But this is what some of those partitions look like after all the glass was removed from them. I was not able to find actually like where these came from. I want to assume it was one of the local aluminum places, but I wasn't able to get that confirmed. I don't know where some of the materials were acquired in the 1968 renovation, but we did remove both partitions. One side was used for parts. The parish used some of the parts of the partition for some other things that they had to do. But the other side, I was able to find a home for one complete partition. A person up in a young couple up in Butler bought it to put as a partition wall between their bedroom and the rest of their house in her own family home that they're renovating. That someone turned into an open concept that she didn't want open concept anymore. So she's very excited to put that in their home and modify it to fit their needs. This was the big chandeliers. This was fun. We learned they were not glass, which was actually a good thing. It was actually a heavy-duty plastic, which was really popular in the 1960s when that was renovated. And in helping them with the other churches that closed in the parish, because you know they didn't want to let me go after I helped them with this one. They wanted me to help with the other ones. It seems like they all kind of came from the same company as well around the same time. The light fixtures share a lot of similarities between the churches, but it was a very heavy-duty plastic and a very lightweight, almost like a cast aluminum almost, or some type of oxide. I'm not a metalsmith either, so. But that being said, the lights were still at least probably 400 pounds, and they had been rigged on a pulley system that the electrician that used to maintain it, and he would like lower it down to the ground to change the bulbs. He couldn't remember how he did that either, because we invited him back to show me so that I could do it, and he went up there and he looked at the winch system and he was like, I don't remember. And I was like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. So the majority of them were pretty simple. We had to figure out a way to make sure they were stable enough that they, you know, we wouldn't release it and they would just plummet to the ground. And then I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't, you know, the only one crawled up in the ceiling, holding on to the winch, making sure I didn't lose it and drop it on the ground. So it was quite a project just finding the support and the help for removing the lights. But that was a fun process. Two of them went to a local person from New Kensington who I guess is fixing up I think has said his son-in-law bought an old school building in New Kensington that he's fixing up, and then he's also interested in historic preservation, so he's hoping to be able to find a place for the really big chandeliers. All the other ones though went to St. Matthias. The St. Matthias guys came and they bought all the other chandeliers that were in St. Lad's. So those are over at St. Matthias. This was my last ditch attempt. I really wanted to try to rescue any of the stuff, like some of the stuff from the outside, which was very hard to do because the cheapest scissor lift or sky lift that we could get was like $2,500 to rent it for like, you know, a weekend or a day or whatever. So we were lucky enough, of course, right at the end when everything was crunch time. Dan Timmons with Timmons Painting let us borrow his electric lift, and I also got to borrow his handsome grandson, who was the operator. And I say borrow, but I paid him for his labor. But he took me up, and we were able to get. I was able to get almost all of the dental molding from this side of the building. I have all that in my storage unit, safekeeping. I haven't decided. Some of it will need repaired because some of it was very rotten. A lot of the fascia and the soffit that was underneath there was just rotten. And I cannot tell you how many bird bones we got in our faces pulling those things off because they were just like, they somehow got like into the roof rafters over there, and we'd pull those things off and a big chunk of the fascia would come off, and then we would just get, you know, 90 years of coal dust and some bat bones and bird bones and, garbage that had flown up there. It was fun. That's why I have the thing. Plus it was, I think it was about 22 degrees that day and pretty windy. So I think I had 2 of those little hand warmers stuffed in my little scruff there, and had a bunch in my pockets, and I was still freezing. But that was fun. I was able to borrow that for 2 days worth. They brought it down for me to borrow, and his grandson helped me do that. I was also able to save the trim and the keystone around the big arched window on that side. And that is in storage as well because I don't necessarily know what I want to do with what's going to happen with it yet. But every day I'm haunted by the fact that I wasn't able to get the keystone on the other side of the building. I try not to think about the things I wasn't able to save because the list is very, very, very small compared to what we were able to save in the 4 months that I was there. But I can't help it. I still think about it. And I was like, when they first started it, I was like, maybe I could sneak in there like in the middle of the night and just like climb up on one of their pieces of machinery and just Spider-Man over there and get it. And I just, it was one of those things that just, it wasn't going to happen with, a lot of the effort was mostly just me. And, I would have a couple volunteers here and there for specific projects, which was, I wouldn't have accomplished nearly as much as I did without that. But at the same time, it was very, very difficult to get everything when it was just me and sometimes my mom, who, is maybe just a little bit over 49. That's a joke. But she's not a team like she used to be either. So it was just 2 girls trying to do our best. That was mostly what it was. These were some of the original windows that were still left in the convent portion of the building. The old wooden sash windows with the window weights and stuff. There was a guy who had contacted me, and he likes to salvage those. So he came in at the very last minute when I wasn't able to get time to do these, and he saved them, and he's going to repurpose them and make sure they live on. And this was this is my trophy. This was the very last thing I was able to pull off the building. It's this big corbel right here. It was one of my favorite pieces of like the architecture of the building. I would always look at it when I go down Spruce. I love corbels, and I always admired this one because it was just so random in the middle of this big oval window, and I just loved it. And it was the demolition, the deal that we had with the demolition crew and the diocese, the deal that I had was they would let me do whatever I could do in the time I could do it, as long as I did not delay anything. So I wasn't going to be able to cause any delays in the abatement beginning, and I wasn't able to pull any strings to delay the actual demolition from getting started. So I was always working with this looming unknown time clock above my head, not knowing how much time I would necessarily have left. And I was very, very blessed in the fact that a lot of the people that I met in the diocese really appreciated what was going on there. And I think on the down low, they pulled some strings of their own, because I did end up getting 4 separate extensions from the demolition itself. When I first got started, they were thinking the demolition was going to start as early as October. So I thought I had a month to do all this stuff, and I ended up with 4 months of doing it. So that was also another good thing. And I always had to make sure, like if someone said, well, how much time do you have? I'm like, I would make sure they knew, I'm not allowed to delay anything or ask for any extensions. I'm not getting in the way of anything, but as much time as you could give me would be very appreciated. And I think that swayed a couple of people that had a certain say so and appreciated what was going on. And they were able to kind of finagle things into getting me a little bit more time. It was also very, very nice to work with the abatement crew, the people that came in to handle the asbestos and the hazardous materials. They were very, very normal, down-to-earth guys, local, and they, in the beginning, it was understood that I was not going to be able to be on the premises during or after the abatement began. So then I began functioning as if the abatement starting was my end date. Well, then I started working with the abatement company and came to find out they were totally willing to work with me. And they started on whatever part of the building I asked them to start on. And they let me keep working on the other half of the building while they were doing their thing. And then vice versa. And, you know, they would, anytime they had a difficulty in their schedule, you know, they would say, hey, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get back there this week. So, you know, it's going to be a little bit longer. And it was very nice working with people who were, you know, kind of on the same team. And yeah, they were just there to do their job, but they weren't about to stop me from doing the crazy things that I was doing in there. I don't know if anyone knows, what was his, I can't remember his first name now. Rich Coward is the guy. He's a local guy from Tarentum or Natrona or something. And he was very, very, very nice. Very nice guy to work with. I saw him like every day for like a month. He kept stealing my donuts. I know. But anyway, yeah. So the demolition date kept getting pushed, and eventually it did. You know, they did clear all their permits. At first, it was going to be the week of Christmas was the set date. Oops, I hope I didn't touch something. Okay. The week of Christmas was going to be the first date, and when they told us that, you know, me and Tom, that the diocese said, the guy from the diocese said, you know, well, we're thinking maybe that wouldn't be so nice to be the week of Christmas. Maybe we do the next week. And we're like, that people might, yeah, like that a little bit more. And then, so we got it pushed to the week after Christmas, which then that's when the demolition crew came through and they said, okay, here's the 2 days that we can start. We can start on January 1st, or we can start on January 8th. And again, I looked at the guy from the diocese and I said, I'm not here to delay it at all, but as much time as you can give me would be great. So they ended up giving me 1 more week at the very, very end. And it just happened to be the weekend that I had 2 months prior planned a weekend away in Lancaster with my husband. So when the time came down to it and it was crunch time and everything was coming down to the wire and there was still so much that we didn't get done and everything, and I had to leave at noon on a Friday to go to our reservation, and this happened at about 11:49 that day. I didn't want to leave because I knew when I came back I was probably only going to have, you know, it was going to be like, if we came back the earliest, it was going to be like 4 p.m. on Sunday, and I would have from 4 p.m. until 8 a.m. on the next day when they would come and start demolition. And I'll be honest, I was there till 1 o'clock in the morning, making sure that I could get absolutely everything I could that Sunday night. But I did not want to leave the church without getting this. And the reason I hadn't gotten it to that point is because it was in a very, very treacherous spot, right above that point of the very, very steep roof. And it was just high enough you couldn't get it with your arms, so you needed something to stand on. And often I was there by myself, and I was very strictly told not to do anything risky when I was there by myself, that I had to obey. So that's why I didn't get it. But then it got time, I was like getting ready to leave, and I was like, I am getting that corbel down. I'm not leaving that on this building. So I literally was hanging on to the trim with one hand, and I had my 5-pound crowbar in the other hand. And for probably a good 40 minutes, I was working it back and forth all along the trim there, trying to loosen it because it had about 40 screws in the back of it that were probably like that long, going every different direction. And I was just free hanging from the front of that window. If anyone like drove past the church at that point, they probably heard me cussing and screaming and, you know, trying to pry it off. But I did get it off, and you can't really see in the picture, but I am crying in that picture because I was so excited that I got my corbel. So I don't know. I might just leave it here at the museum so people could still look at it, because I really don't know what I would do with it. But I love it, and I didn't want it to go down with the building. So that's the story of my little corbel. What's happening here? Why is it not? Okay. The iron gates, the maintenance guys with the parish took the iron gates and put those up at Our Lady of Victory. They're in the little prayer garden, or whatever it is that they called it, where like just outside the one door at Our Lady of Victory. They're mounted very nicely against the wall there for display. So those are still available to see. And then we did save, I hope I'm not disrespecting anyone, but I nicknamed him Unhappy Jesus because he's not smiling. I thought he was, but he's not. He's welcoming you, but he's not smiling. So I called him Unhappy Welcoming Jesus. But he was the only painting that was on canvas. The only one that was on canvas in the entire church, because he was added in the 1960s renovation, and they even have the artist who painted him in the Diamond Jubilee thing. But we were able to save him, and he's in storage with the parish as well. All the other paintings that were in the church, we explored every possible outcome, like every possible way we could have tried to get those paintings off the walls. But they were painted directly onto the plaster, and the plaster was crumbling. It was just horsehair plaster, and it was, you know, already crumbling from the sheetrock and everything. I mean, I was gonna rent like an industrial solvent with like a tape and like try to just like lift the painting off. Or I was exploring, we did test it out with one of like the small things in the dome, the little small like I forget what they're called now. The name is escaping me. The little fleur-de-lis, yes. We experimented with one of those to see if we could even just like take a sawzall and cut around them. No, they just crumbled. The plaster just would not hold together. You know, and if there even was a way of exploring it, it probably would have cost a lot of money. So we just had everybody that wanted to come through, came through and took pictures of them. We had a few professional photographers that came through and took pictures of them so that they could at least live on in that way. But that was a very unfortunate thing. It took us a while to swallow that one because we just wanted to find a way, but there was just no way to save those on the walls. I'm sorry, Caitlin, but I did include the video of us. We were trying to all the corbels that were on the above the windows. I had hoped upon hope that they were wood, like the small ones that were below the windows, but they were not. But we decided to experiment with one that was in the balcony that had already started to kind of crack and separate from the wall. The entire setup, the mantle part that went across the window and the corbels, was literally just cast plaster molds. And it was all one piece. And it was, I mean, it was very intricately done, but it was not ever meant to come off in one piece. But I was just desperate to try. So me and Caitlin did, and we were very tired, and I'm not very, I don't have a filter, so I don't know if there's any swearing in this video. I hope there's not. But just as a warning, there might be a cuss or so. But we were successful. It was very heavy. The whole thing wanted to come off, and also the window was already gone, so we were just like above a big opening. So if we lost our grip on it, the whole thing was just going to go right out the window. And So we had a makeshift platform that we made out of an old door that was sitting up there from somewhere else. And we were hoping to just kind of lay it down on that. But I think the whole thing probably weighed at least like 150 or 200 pounds, maybe. See, it's all one piece. And then the mantle comes apart. Yeah. This is that. I did not think we were going to get one of the corbels, and for some reason, one of them stayed intact. I was so excited, as you can see. So that is also in storage. I was so excited. But we're hoping to be able to put that. I think they're hoping to do a display up at Blessed Sacrament for the churches that had closed, and I'm hoping that this will be able to go in that. If not, I can bring it here maybe for the museum so that people can enjoy it. But it's literally the only one we were able to save. Very heavy, yeah. I believe it's also in storage. See, we're above a big open window that fell, probably dropped at least 30 or 40 feet to the ground. So they were literally only stuck in the wall with little wood pegs. So it was like 100 and something pounds resting on top of those windows for all these years. They were only in there with wood pegs. That's crazy. I'm sorry, I have to take a sip. This section is this very brief section on some of the hidden treasures. This was one of the very first things that I discovered when I came in after they had taken all of the altars out. There was a very large pile of scrap wood that was in the middle of the floor in a very inconvenient location. So I took it upon myself instead of, just letting the maintenance guys throw it out. As you can see, I like to save scrap wood and, try to repurpose it. So I was going through it and saving what wood was able to be saved and, making a separate pile. And in doing so, I found a rolled up tapestry that nobody knows where it came from or where it was or why it was in this big pile. It looked like it was the back of it was just like a striped fabric. It almost looked like an old linoleum, like the back of an old linoleum, but it was like striped like a canvas. And when I pulled it out and I started to unroll it and I saw paint, I immediately called Tom and I was like, I think this is something that isn't supposed to be in this pile. And so we unrolled it, and it's a large painting. It's probably about 8 feet long and maybe 3 feet wide. And I think that it was hidden in the wall behind one of the altars, and that's how it ended up in that pile. So that is still also in storage, awaiting further investigation, and that'll hopefully be on display somewhere else. This was a little fun thing when I was dismantling the staircase in the basement. I took the newel post off, and it looked like a squirrel or rat had been stuffing candy wrappers in there for at least several years, and like some of the candy wrappers dated at least back to like the 50s. But then I found a whole empty bottle of Red Ribbon soda. I was like, I don't think this was a squirrel. I think this was maybe something else. There was a hole in the newel post where there used to be an outlet. It was just an open hole, and I think some kids back in the day were just stuffing their stuff in there. But that was fun. And then in the basement of the school, as I was trying to uncover the history of the changes that happened in the school and whatnot, this was in one of the rooms that was down there that used to be an exterior wall facing the river side of the school, like the side that faces the river. And then they added the addition of the the stairwell and stuff. When they did that, they just sealed this window up inside the wall and left it. It's one of the original windows that you saw in the truck earlier that the person came and salvaged. But it was fun uncovering that from behind a painted silhouette that was just on the wall. The frame itself the glass was obviously broken. They actually ran plumbing straight through it, straight through the actual the actual frame of the window too. So there was one side of it was all splintered, but I did pull it out and save it. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. You know, it's with all the other old windows frames that I have saved for hopeful reuse. But this was one of my favorite discoveries with Farmer Bob from Sarver, who had volunteered to help me quite often down there. We found the original exit door to the fire escape that they sealed up. They just sealed it up inside the wall. This was us. You know, if you pay attention to the subtle differences in walls, like, you know, my company is called Old Bones because that's what I look for. I look for the old bones of buildings because oftentimes they're not properly hidden, so you can still see them. I noticed that the baseboard was different on this section of wall, right where the chalkboard had ended as well. And then it was a separate small piece where the rest of the chalkboards were big. And so I was like, and then I went over, started knocking, and it was a hollow wall. I said, I think there's something behind this wall. So we started looking, and it was in the 50s and 60s, whenever they did like plaster work, they would put this stupid steel mesh in. This stuff was awful. I hate coming across this stuff. It is. I'm sorry. I'm very excited. Yeah, well, it's way stronger. I mean, it is like rolled steel, very, very dense. I mean, it's amazing that things, you know, fall down at all, because if they're held up, yeah, it's basically mesh rebar. Yeah. But this is that door, and I do have that door. I saved the whole thing. We had to tear apart the frame because it was a door that swung out, but it could no longer swing out because there was a bathroom on the other side that they had built the addition on. So I had to like splinter out the door frame and pull it in from the inside. But I did save it and still has the original hardware and everything. This was at the point where the school was mostly empty and we were just able to make a mess, you know. But yeah, it just had a big deadbolt on it, and that was the only way that it locked was this big, thick, like jail cell deadbolt, and that was it. This was a fun thing that we found behind one of the baseboards in one of the school buildings. Is an old postcard from Christmas, and it says, "Old Santa is the biggest fraud. We grown folks can't forget it. He works us nearly out of breath and then takes all the credit." So I gave that to Bob as a token for helping me out. He thought that was really cool. I call it ghetto laminating. When I get an old piece of paper that wants to just disintegrate, I just take packing tape and I like quickly laminate it with some packing tape to preserve it. And then this is a piece that I actually brought with me. It was attached to the back of one of the baseboards. It's the only one I found, and it is a sticker from a lumber and milling company from Brayburn. That's where all of the wood came from when they built the school. That's where all the baseboard and millwork came from. So I was shocked that it was in such good shape, the tag itself, and I mean it looks practically like it was made yesterday. So that's the cool things that I like to find. This is the stained glass that everybody knows and loves. That was my main goal when I took on this project. They kept saying, like, if we get the glass, I said, there's no if, okay? I don't care if I'm up on a ladder, stacked on a ladder, stacked on a ladder, all by myself in the middle of the night. I'm gonna try to get those windows out of there. But luckily, I got a group of volunteers from the Verona area that they have always had a passion for stained glass, and they've had opportunities to help out with a couple other churches removing. So they had some experience. They had some coaching from one of the stained glass people in Pittsburgh on how to properly remove stained glass. So they dedicated many hours to come and help me remove that stuff. And I used a lot of the scrap wood from the altars to create the crates out of. And I also used the padding that came from the kneelers, from the pews. I took the little padding strips off and I built those into the crates that were I made them exactly the size of the windows. The small ones were 58 inches wide, and each pane was between like 28 and 46 inches tall, and each one weighed probably between 40 to some of the bigger ones are probably closer to 80 pounds. And they all just wanted to come apart, but we didn't want to let them come apart. So luckily we were able to save every single one. There's a picture of me up about 30 feet in the air on scaffolding on a platform. The scaffolding that the church had didn't go 3 stories, but I made it go 3 stories. I built another platform out of a couple of the extra poles that were there, out of some 2x4s and hollow core doors, and I was the only one brave enough to get up on it because it was pretty sketchy. But I made sure I had safety measures in place, and we were able to get them down from that height. And that's a before and after we took them out. It was bittersweet, but it was nice seeing that they were out and they were safe from demolition. They're in storage at the church right now. I think the church's goal is still to try to explore getting them put into protective light boxes to put on the exterior walls up at Blessed Sacrament. But it's going to require a lot of funding to do that, especially in restoring the stained glass. They want to keep them in the parish, but the state of disrepair and then the state of trying to fashion a box that will keep them safe for years to come has a pretty hefty price tag on it. So I think they're still exploring that, but for right now they are safe in the boxes I made in storage with the parish. And here's a very poor quality, because I don't know if you know anything about phones, but Android and iPhone do not agree. My mom took this video on her Android phone, so it's a little grainy, but this is a video of us removing some of the panels, like the big top panel. It took usually 3 to 4 of us to make sure it got down safely. We had a system that was a trial and error based system that we figured out a pretty good method of. But for the big windows that were last, they ended up being last, we needed at least 3 people to get them down because they were very, very heavy and just very, very big. So you needed like points of contact on every fragile part of the window, or the whole thing would just want to come apart at the seams. I know it's not the best quality video, but it's just giving you an example of watching us, how we did it. Very carefully and holding our breath and sweating down our backs, even though it was about 20 degrees in there, because you know that's the month that it decided to be the coldest. At one point, I seriously asked Tom, I'm like, could I make a bonfire in here? And he told me no. But I had a lip on the bottom of the door, and then I would just basically build the crate right around it. We used hollow core doors that were from in the school and used that as the backboard for them. And then I would put the kneelers down on it. We'd cut the size, and then I would seal them in place as they were. And then this was just us down further. Those are the crates that I made. They're all nice and tightly boxed and labeled, and I even put handles on the sides for the maintenance guys so they didn't have to complain about carrying them. They're all safely in storage. This is just some pictures of the balcony. Oh, I'm sorry. This is what this is. This was the before and after we took the oval window out. It was not easy. Me and Tom Babbitt's son, Danny. It was just the 2 of us. and somehow we got it out. It was 8 feet wide and 5 feet tall. And it was the only window that also did not have any security glass on the outside of it. So for 120 years, it was just exposed to the elements, sitting there in its own wood frame, and it survived. There was not a single crack in it. It did not crack when we took it out. And that's the picture. And that's the corbel that I had to hang. I had to hang like 6 feet in the air, free falling, to get that corbel out. And then that's the picture of the window. That actually went to a former parishioner who had deep roots to the church, who had long ago moved to West Virginia and happened to see that I had listed this on Facebook. And he was the first one to reach out, and he got it. They're putting an addition on their home, and then he's going to put that as the center focus on the addition on their home. So that's a picture of it. That's the inside. This is the original finish of it, and then that's the painted exterior. The organ, we had a group of volunteers that, well, not volunteers, a group of experts in historic instruments and organ repair and preservation. They came and they offered to look through the organ, see what was still viable, and rescue what they could. And they were able to take, at first they didn't think they were going to be able to take anything, because when the organ was converted to electric in the 90s, according to them, with the pieces that were in there, they said it was probably in the 90s, even though it was done in the 90s, but they used an 80s model organ. So, but he said when they did that, the Rogers Organ Company, when they come in and they do that, they are not gentle or careful. And so I would say at least 60%, 60 to 75% of the organ was gone. The actual functioning parts was either gone or destroyed because they just crunched them. You know, they're lead, so they're very soft pipes. They either were just crunched and up there, or they just threw them out, he said. They probably didn't even recycle them. They just threw them out. But he was able to discover that in the case that was behind the speakers, there was still at least 35% of the organ pipes were just sealed away and protected, and they were able to take those as well as some other pieces of the organ to be able to find new homes for. They still made noise and everything. They were still, you know, you could still make a sound with them like an instrument. So that was really, really nice. That's a picture of some of the funky pipes, how they had to make them fit in the box. They just bent them a certain way. The organ was purchased for the church in 1912. And that was even before the church had electricity. It still had gas lighting. And it was 50% purchased by Andrew Carnegie, because at the time, Andrew Carnegie's foundation had a thing where they were helping churches finance big purchases like this and things like that. So they applied for that, and they got the 50%. So they had to pay $2,000, and Andrew Carnegie paid $2,000. And an organ like this in today's market would be about 200 to 300,000, just for the basic model. So that puts that a little bit in perspective. And this is my last slide. I wanted to show this. This is my one-page blooper reel. One of the days I was there by myself. This door of the classroom in one of the convent classrooms, it had been open like forever, but I was going through and I was starting to try to take the hardware off the doors. And when I reached around to shut the door, there was a dead bat on the door handle, and it scared me really, really bad. And I kept the little bat. He was petrified. He was like perfectly preserved. He'd probably been dead for several years. He was just hanging there on the doorknob, and I got to keep him because he left an impression on me. He scared the heck out of me one day. And that is the end of my presentation.